Representative Talarico.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to just make a couple points, and then I know we want to get to witnesses and our public testimony, so I'll be brief. One, I just wanted to respond to Representative Schoolcraft and Representative Leah Wilson, both friends of mine, dismissing millionaires and billionaires. There are about 650,000 households in Texas that are millionaire households, so not an insignificant number. What I'm more concerned about is families making $600,000, $500,000, $400,000, $300,000, $200,000, taking taxpayer money that could be going to our underfunded public schools. And if we think millionaires and billionaires are kind of insignificant, then why not just ban them from participating in the bill? Right? Again, I think there's ways we can work together to make this bill better. That's one area I would recommend is let's just cap income. Representative Schoolcraft, I know you've served here before in the 1980s, and so I don't want to cast aspersions on folks who are pushing this bill. I just want to call out what their interests are, whether it's financial or ideological. Milton Friedman, you mentioned, has an ideological commitment to privatization. We've seen what that privatization has done in healthcare. We've seen what it's done in higher ed. We've seen what it's done in childcare, where those things are no longer public goods, but they are now out of reach for most working class people. I refuse to let that happen to our K through 12 public education system. And I'll also point out the first voucher bill was proposed in the legislature here in Texas in 1957, 3 years after the Brown versus Board of Education decision came down from the Supreme Court. That first voucher bill was a deliberate attempt to resegregate public schools, to allow white parents to take their students out of newly integrated public schools and send them to white-only private schools. Thankfully, Texans defeated that voucher scam in '57, and we've defeated them every decade since, including 2 years ago. I hope the same remains true this year. I also, we've talked a lot about special education. I know we're probably going to hear from witnesses. I do just, again, from my experience as an educator, there is a vast spectrum of disabilities and special needs. Things that take less intensive resources, things like ADHD, versus severe developmental or physical disabilities. And so when we talk about private schools serving a lot of special needs kids, I think it's important to dive into where on that spectrum are we looking at. There are only 70 private schools in Texas that have a special education program. Again, different if you have a kid with ADHD in your school, that's different than having a special education program. There are only 70 that have that. The average tuition at those 70 private schools is $19,000 a year, far more than the voucher. But I would say that if we took the $30,000 that Chairman Buckley you've put in your bill, if we gave that to public schools, they could have a lot more options to serve those high-cost needs in a public school setting without giving up their IDEA rights, which they do if they have to go to a private school. So I guess the broader point I'm trying to make is there's a general attitude that we can do both. We can support our public schools and we can give our money to private schools. I really want to question that assumption. We have limited state dollars. We have limited taxpayer funds. And everything we do is a choice here. If we're going to spend $7 billion, which the fiscal note, I believe, is $7 billion for the second biennium for this program, that $7 billion could do a lot in our public schools. There's this, I've heard before that, we've been trying to fix public education and it's not working. We're 44th in the nation in per student education funding. I mean, we're not trying very hard, in my opinion. And so, if we spent $7 billion for our special education programs in public schools, we could hire more than 100,000 new paraprofessionals, an army of paraprofessionals. We could give every SPED teacher a $70,000 pay raise. We could double their salary with $7 billion. So again, everything is a choice when we're talking about taxpayer funds, and I worry that we are making a disastrous choice with this bill. The last comment I want to make.
Representative Talarico, just briefly, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Sure.
The bill caps special education ESAs at 30,000.
Yes.
That's not the basis for it.
Yes.
Okay. So that will vary based on the IEP.
Of course.
And then have members direct themselves to the fiscal note to show there's not a $7 billion impact, so.
There's not a $7 billion impact
No.
in the second
No.
biennium?
No.
What is the cost in the second biennium?
3.3?
A year or
Yeah.
for the biennium?
Yeah. And per year,
And so what is it total for the biennium?
6 something?
Six something?
Yeah. But what,
6 point.
okay.
So I think when
talk-
you start to look into what this bill starts to grow, not only in the first biennium, but into the second, into 5 years out, you're looking at something very close to $7 billion. And I mean, I'm looking at the fiscal note right now, and that's the calculation I'm getting when you start to add up all these numbers. But whether or not you want to say it's 6 point something or 7 billion. But my point is that funding, if we put it into the basic allotment, which we heard all last week from every school district, that's where we could do the most good, or if we put it into special education, it could be transformative. And so by making the decision not to put that $6 or $7 billion into our public schools, and we allow inflation to keep eating at our public schools, we are defunding them, even if no public school students ever take advantage of the voucher program. Let's just say it all goes to kids who are currently in private school. There are 250,000 private school kids in Texas. There are more homeschool kids in Texas. It's looking like maybe 1 million new kids that could be drawing from our general revenue. So even if no public school kids ever leave a public school and go to a private school, we would be defunding our public schools because of inflation and because of the opportunity costs of not investing that $6 or $7 billion into our system. I agree with Chairman Dutton. There's nothing magical about a private school. They just have more funding and less testing. Two things we could do for public schools today if we wanted to help the 5.5 million Texas school children. I personally, maybe this is just my Texan pride, but I think there's nothing our Texas public schools can't do if we give them the resources and the tools to be successful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.